Captain Jake Morrison stood alone at the edge of the bridge, staring into the void of space, watching as the last remnants of the Cathro system were swallowed by the Devourers, an alien race that consumed entire worlds to fuel their insatiable hunger. The once proud system had been reduced to a crimson smear, the planet's mere specks lost to the galaxy. This was no ordinary invasion. The Devourers didn't simply conquer, they consumed, and then converted every living thing into their twisted, biomechanical army. The lights of Cathro blinked out in an instant, swallowed by the ever-growing hunger of the enemy. Morrison, a veteran soldier of Earth's defense forces, felt the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The Galactic Council, a once proud alliance of peaceful species, had fallen to the Devourers' relentless aggression. But the Council, despite their advanced technology and vast knowledge, couldn't fight this enemy. They were no longer soldiers, they were scholars, artists, diplomats. They had long since evolved past violence. They were no match for the savagery of the Devourers. "Captain, incoming transmission," Lieutenant Ryan Cooper's voice broke through Morrison's thoughts. His tone was always steady, but even he couldn't hide the concern in his voice. Morrison turned, eyes narrowing. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the image of Commander Zethara, a towering Zelani with skin the color of cobalt, her sharp, angular features radiating both strength and sorrow. The transmission was desperate, laced with the unspoken fear of a people who had already witnessed the fall of their own kind. "Captain Morrison," Zethara's voice was strained but firm. "The Council has made a decision, and it's one we never imagined we'd have to make. We're asking for your help, humanity's help." Morrison's brow furrowed as he stood to attention. "What's happened, Commander? Why do you need us?" Zethara's eyes, usually so calm, were darkened with a heaviness that Morrison had never seen before. She was no stranger to war, but this was different. The Devourers had already devoured systems beyond saving. "The Devourers have consumed over half the galaxy in the last year alone," she said quietly. "We are all that remains, but our weapons, they don't work against them. Our tactics have failed. Even our finest minds can't predict them, let alone fight them. The Council has only one option left." She paused, her gaze firm. "We need soldiers, Captain, not diplomats, not scientists, soldiers, and we need Earth." The words hit Morrison like a punch to the gut. Earth's reputation was built on its relentless, sometimes controversial military might. Its people, known as Deathworlders, were considered unpredictable, aggressive, and violent by the standards of the peaceful species within the Galactic Council. They fought because it was in their nature. They fought because they had to survive. But this wasn't just any fight. This was a fight for the survival of the entire galaxy. The stakes were higher than anything humanity had ever faced. Morrison nodded, his face grim. "How can we help, Commander? What do you need from us?" Zethara's eyes softened. "We need everything you have, all of your strength, your knowledge of combat, and most importantly, we need your will to fight, to survive." "Then we'll give it to you." Morrison's voice was calm, steady, but beneath it ran a cold current of determination. Humanity might not have been part of the Galactic Council, but if they had to save this galaxy, they would. The Council had turned to humanity for one simple reason. They were the only ones who knew how to win when all seemed lost. The hum of the engines filled the bridge of the UES Retribution, Earth's flagship, as it prepared to enter faster-than-light travel. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes locked on the swirling vortex of hyperspace that lay ahead. The weight of what was to come pressed down on him, but there was no turning back. The fate of the galaxy rested on the shoulders of the men and women of Earth's military. They had no idea what they were truly up against. "Hyperspace jump in 3, 2, 1. Lieutenant Cooper's voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the tension in the air. Everyone on the bridge knew they were heading into the unknown. The ship lurched forward as the Retribution pierced the fabric of space itself, the stars stretching out into luminous lines of light. For a moment, there was nothing but the silence of the cosmos. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, they shot through the void, headed straight for Zelani space. Morrison turned to his crew, his eyes scanning the faces of his officers. This was no longer a military operation. This was humanity's last stand. They were fighting not just for Earth, but for all life in the galaxy. "Commander Wang," Morrison called, his voice commanding attention. "What's our status on the fleet?" Commander Lisa Wang, his second-in-command, glanced at her console before looking back up. "We're on course, Captain. Our fleet's holding steady, but I've got some unsettling reports coming in from the Council's fleet. They're already engaged with the Devourers in the Kilo system. The situation's dire. We need to get there fast. Morrison nodded grimly. The Council's fleet had been fighting for months, yet every engagement had ended in failure. The Devourers adapted too quickly, their bioships stronger and more unpredictable with each battle. The Council's elegant, precise tactics were ineffective against an enemy that didn't care about minimizing casualties. The Devourers only cared about one thing: consumption. "Keep me updated," Morrison said, turning to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster. Just as the words left his mouth, a warning alarm blared through the ship, cutting through the quiet hum of the engine. The sudden shift in atmosphere was enough to snap everyone to attention. "Captain, we've got incoming," Foster's voice was urgent. "Devourer bioships, they're already here." The viewports flashed with images of enemy ships, dark, pulsating vessels that seemed to grow and shift with a mind of their own. They were enormous, their organic hulls wrapped in biomechanical tendrils that pulsed with an unnatural light. The Devourers didn't build ships in the traditional sense. They grew them, turning planets and living creatures into instruments of war. Morrison's stomach tightened at the sight of them. These were the creatures that had wiped out entire systems. These were the monsters humanity would have to face. "Enemy fleet is already on our sensors," Wang continued, her voice steady but strained. "They're more advanced than anything we've encountered. Our weapons might not even scratch them." "We'll find a way," Morrison said, his voice firm. He turned to his officers. "Prepare for battle, get the fleet into formation. We'll hit them hard and fast." The room buzzed with activity as the crew sprang into action. The Retribution's engines roared to life as the ship swiveled into position, its weapon systems locking into place. The remaining ships of Earth's fleet, smaller, heavily modified craft, began to fall into their formation behind the Retribution, each vessel bristling with weaponry. "We're going to show them what humanity is capable of," Morrison muttered, watching as his fleet powered up. Just then, the communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Barnes, called out, her voice filled with urgency. "Captain, we've received a message from the Zelani fleet. Commander Zethara wants to speak to you." Morrison's hand shot out, and the screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Commander Zethara. Her blue skin, usually so regal, was now marred by the tension of war. Her eyes betrayed the same exhaustion that Morrison felt in his bones. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I'm glad you've arrived, but we're already in the thick of it. The Devourers are unlike anything we've ever faced. We've tried everything to stop them, but their tactics—" "I know," Morrison interrupted, his eyes scanning the enemy ships on the view screen. "We'll fight them in our own way. We'll win this, Commander." Zethara's eyes softened, and for a moment Morrison saw the flicker of doubt in her expression, but she quickly masked it with resolve. "The fate of the galaxy rests on your people, Captain. We need your strength." The connection flickered out as the battle unfolded before them. Earth's fleet locked in with the Devourer ships, energy blasts and kinetic projectiles streaking through space like fiery comets. Morrison's fingers clenched around the armrest of his chair. "All right, people," he said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "Time to show them what humanity can do." The Retribution shot forward, weapons blazing. The ship's hull shuddered as enemy fire struck it, but the vessel held strong. Morrison could feel the ship's power thrumming beneath his feet as it entered the fray. The battle was chaotic, and the human fleet quickly realized that conventional tactics wouldn't work against the Devourers. They were too fast, too adaptive. Earth's ships would have to be brutal, unpredictable, just like the humans who piloted them. Morrison's mind raced as he issued orders. They would fight in the most ruthless way possible. No mercy, no hesitation. They couldn't afford to play by the rules. The galaxy's survival depended on them doing whatever it took. Just as the Retribution raked its weapons across the side of a Devourer bioship, the ship's sensors screamed. A new threat had appeared, a Devourer planet killer, a massive vessel the size of a moon, its weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds in a matter of hours. Morrison's heart skipped a beat. This was what they were up against. "Lieutenant Foster," he ordered, his voice cold, "target the planet killer's weak spots. We need to disable it, not destroy it." Foster's fingers flew over the controls, launching a barrage of missiles aimed at the creature's massive energy shields. But the Devourer planet killer adapted quickly, its armor shifting and regenerating almost as fast as the human weapons could strike. "We need a plan B, Captain," Wang said, her voice strained as her eyes flicked over the tactical display. Morrison's mind raced. They couldn't beat this thing with force alone. They had to find a way to outsmart it. Plan B is simple, Morrison said, his eyes gleaming with determination. We're going to kill it with fear. He turned to Barnes. Get me Dr. Susan Martinez now. Dr. Susan Martinez had spent the last few days poring over the data from the Devourer bioships, information that had been passed to the human fleet by the Galactic Council, though much of it was incomplete and cryptic. She had seen the terrifying images of the creatures, the grotesque blend of biomechanical constructs and organic matter. But this was something else. A planet killer the size of a moon was heading straight for them. Morrison stood in the heart of the bridge, watching the hulking mass of the enemy ship appear on the tactical display. It was so vast, its presence nearly suffocating. The Retribution was a formidable warship, but it was nothing compared to the sheer scale of the Devourer planet killer. The odds were stacked against them. We can't take this thing down with conventional tactics, Morrison muttered under his breath. We need something unexpected. Captain, Barnes called from her station. We've got a line to Dr. Martinez. She's ready for you. Morrison nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. The battle raged on outside, but inside, the silence between the crew was palpable. They were all waiting for something, anything, that could turn the tide in their favor. He grabbed the communicator. Dr. Martinez, talk to me. Martinez's voice came through, calm yet tinged with urgency. Captain, we've got a potential advantage. The Devourer's bioships are designed to adapt rapidly to new threats. We've seen it in their ability to regenerate, to modify their structures, and even their tactics in real time. Yeah, we've noticed that, Morrison said, his tone dry. But they're also tougher than anything we've ever faced. Our weapons aren't cutting it. I know, Martinez replied, but I've been working on something that could break their adaptive cycle. Morrison's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? What can we do that'll stop them from adapting? Martinez paused. We've seen it before in their conversion process. They turn other species into parts of their collective by overriding their survival instincts. It's how they maintain cohesion. But I've been studying their neural interfaces, the way their collective mind works. They rely on a shared consciousness to coordinate their strategies. Morrison felt a flicker of hope, and if we can disrupt that shared consciousness, break the hive mind's coherence, we can throw their entire strategy into chaos, Martinez continued. I've developed a system that can interfere with their neural networks, but it's not going to be easy to deploy. Tell me what you need and it's yours, Morrison said, his voice firm. I need a ship to get close enough to the planet killer's central command hub, Martinez explained. I'll launch a biovirus that'll send their collective mind into a complete meltdown, but the ship that deploys the virus will be exposed to heavy enemy fire. It'll be a one-way mission. Morrison didn't hesitate. The human spirit was built on sacrifice, but the idea of throwing away lives, even for the greater good, didn't sit well with him. We're not sending anyone to die without a plan. I know, Martinez responded softly, but the only way to defeat them is to make them feel fear. Fear disrupts them. It's not something they've ever encountered before. Morrison clenched his jaw. Fear, that's it. We'll fight them like we fought ourselves all those years ago, survive by any means necessary. He turned to Wang. Get me Lieutenant Foster, we're going in. The battle had already escalated to a fever pitch. Earth's fleet, now engaged in direct combat with the Devourers, was outgunned, but they were relentless. Their vessels, smaller and more agile than the Devourer bioships, danced around the massive enemy ships, launching missile strikes and energy blasts that did little to halt the Devourer's advance. Foster appeared on the bridge, her face hard and focused. Captain, what's the plan? Morrison's eyes met hers. We're going to do something crazy. I need you to get close enough to that planet killer to deploy Dr. Martinez's virus. Her gaze hardened. You're asking for a suicide mission, sir. That's not what I'm asking, Morrison said firmly. I'm asking for you to use everything we've got, our unpredictability, our adaptability. We're not going in to win this the clean way. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Foster hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Understood, Captain. We'll make them feel it. The Retribution surged forward, its engines firing at full thrust as it raced toward the Devourer planet killer. The enemy ships, sensing the approaching danger, turned to engage, their massive weapon systems aimed squarely at the human fleet. But Morrison had a different plan. "We need to pull their attention away from Foster's ship," Morrison ordered, his voice steady despite the tension that gripped his chest. "I want every ship in our fleet to converge on the planet killer, draw their fire, draw their eyes." Wang didn't hesitate, issuing orders to the fleet. The ships of Earth's military scattered in every direction, using their superior maneuverability to create chaos in the Devourer ranks. It worked. The Devourers' focus shifted, their ships splitting and turning, desperate to engage Earth's fleet in a dogfight. That was all the opening they needed. Lieutenant Foster, piloting the UES Vengeance, broke through the chaos, racing toward the planet killer's central command hub. She was a blur of motion, firing off evasive maneuvers and dodging enemy fire with ruthless precision. The ship was damaged, its hull blackened and pocked with the scars of battle, but it kept pushing forward. Foster's mind was clear. There was no turning back. The planet killer loomed larger in the distance, its dark, ominous mass casting an unnatural shadow over the surrounding battle. The virus was ready, but the real challenge now was making it close enough to deploy it. "Hold on, Foster," Morrison muttered under his breath, watching the countdown to deployment. Just as she was about to launch the virus, the planet killer's massive weapons lit up. A wave of energy blasted out, a flood of light and force that rocked the Vengeance to its core. Foster's hands flew across the controls, steering the ship to avoid a fatal hit. She was seconds from disaster when the ship's emergency systems kicked in, compensating for the impact and keeping her alive. "Deploying now," Foster said, her voice steady, even as the ship shuddered under another barrage of fire. She launched the virus, a pulse of energy that shot toward the planet killer like a deadly spear. The moment the virus was deployed, the galaxy held its breath. For a split second, there was nothing but silence. No enemy fire, no screams of battle, just the cold, void-like stillness of space. Then the Devourer planet killer shuddered. The organic tendrils that once pulsed with energy began to twitch erratically, like the last spasms of a dying creature. The glowing lights of the planet killer's hull flickered in an unpredictable pattern, and for the first time in a long while, it seemed vulnerable. "Captain, it's working," Lieutenant Amy Foster's voice rang out over the comms. "The virus is hitting their central consciousness. They're losing cohesion. The communication link cut off abruptly. Morrison's eyes shot to the tactical display as the screen showed the Vengeance rocketing toward the planet killer. But a massive energy surge burst from the planet killer's core, sending out shockwaves that rattled everything in its path. "Foster, report," Morrison barked, his heart racing. "We're not going to make it, Captain," came the strained reply. "The planet killer's reaction is—" The transmission cut again, leaving nothing but static. Morrison slammed his fist on the armrest, cursing under his breath. This was it. Their only chance to stop the Devourers had come down to this moment. It was supposed to work. It had to work. Suddenly, the screen flickered to life again, showing the Vengeance, its engines barely holding together, but it was still intact. And then Morrison saw it. Foster had somehow managed to steer the Vengeance into the belly of the planet killer. The ship was dangerously close, wedged between the hulking vessel's biomechanical coils. "Captain, the virus is working better than expected," Foster's voice crackled back to him. "Their central neural network is fragmenting. The planet killer's systems are failing, but I'm not going to make it out of here." "Foster, no," Morrison shouted. "Get out of there now, that's an order." "I can't, sir," Foster replied, her voice thick with determination and resignation. "There's no time. You need to focus on the fleet. Keep them in the fight. I'll make sure this thing doesn't go anywhere." Morrison felt his chest tighten. He had always known that sacrifice would be a part of this mission, but hearing it come from one of his own, it hit harder than any battlefield wound. "You're not doing this alone, Lieutenant," Morrison said, voice cracking. He turned to Wang. "Lieutenant Wang, get the rest of the fleet in position. We hit them now, or they'll recover and take us all down." The fleet, already battered, shifted position under the orders of Earth's commanders. But the Devourers weren't going down without a fight. Their remaining bioships, though scattered and disoriented by the virus, began to regroup. They were fast, and they adapted quickly. "Captain incoming," Foster's voice came once again, strained and quiet. I won't make it, but you will. The virus worked. They can't adapt fast enough. They're breaking down." The transmission sputtered out, leaving Morrison staring at the screen, helpless. It wasn't just a soldier on the line now, it was a friend. He had seen this before in war-torn deserts in foreign cities, but here in the cold expanse of space, it felt like an entire universe was losing its hope. "Lieutenant Foster, you're not alone," Morrison whispered to himself. "I promise you." The Vengeance, a symbol of humanity's stubborn will to survive, disappeared into the glowing maw of the Devourer planet killer, a final act of defiance. The virus's effect. On the battlefield, the effect of the virus was instantaneous. The once formidable planet killer's systems began to deteriorate, its massive weapon systems flickering erratically. The bioships around it, once ruthless in their pursuit of destruction, now began to falter. Their once coordinated movements grew frantic, uncoordinated, as if they were drowning in their own panic. The moment the Devourer's collective consciousness began to crack, Earth's fleet moved in like a swarm of bees. The chaos among the enemy gave Earth's ships the opening they needed. Missile barrages and energy weapons flared across the battlefield, ripping into the bioships. "Focus fire on the planet killer's core," Morrison ordered, voice tight with resolve. The Retribution moved forward, unleashing a barrage of nuclear projectiles directly at the heart of the Devourer planet killer. Each strike sent ripples through the monstrous vessel, destabilizing its structure further. The Devourers couldn't keep up with the intensity of the attack. For the first time, they seemed vulnerable. The Vengeance, still hanging in the belly of the planet killer, exploded in a violent flash that lit up the dark sky. The shockwave rippled outward, and for a brief moment, Morrison thought that would be the end. But it was. The explosion of the Vengeance was the final nail in the coffin. It sent a shockwave through the planet killer's hull that reverberated across the battlefield. The massive vessel began to break apart, its biostructures destabilizing completely. The Devourer's once impenetrable stronghold was crumbling. The Devourer fleet, now scattered and disoriented, was on the verge of collapse. Morrison looked to his officers, who were already in motion, their faces grim with the understanding of what had just happened. "Finish it," Morrison said, his voice low. "We end this now." The aftermath of victory. The final blows were swift. Earth's fleet, combined with the remaining Zelani ships, tore through the remaining Devourer bioships, their massive fleets finally breaking apart as the planet killer collapsed into itself. The galaxy held its breath as the last remnants of the enemy vanished into the void. But Morrison couldn't feel the satisfaction of victory. His mind was still on Foster, still on the sacrifice that had turned the tide of the battle. The crew of the Vengeance had given everything to ensure that humanity had a chance to survive, and they had succeeded. "Captain, we've won," Wang said, her voice strained but triumphant. Morrison didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the wreckage of the battle, his eyes drawn to the burning remains of the Devourer fleet. Victory was theirs, but it had come at a cost. Humanity's first true battle with the galaxy's biggest threat had been won, but it was also clear that they weren't finished yet. "We've won," Morrison said quietly, "but the war isn't over, not yet." The victory against the Devourers is bittersweet, as Foster's sacrifice weighs heavily on Morrison and his crew. The galaxy is not yet safe, and there's a lingering question. What is the true cost of this victory? What will humanity's role be in the larger conflict to come? The aftermath of the battle was a strange kind of silence. In the void of space, the remnants of the Devourer fleet drifted, disintegrating into cosmic dust. Their planet killer was no more, reduced to a mass of twisted metal and broken organic tissue. The victory was complete, but hollow. Morrison stood in the midst of it all, the face of triumph on his crew mirrored by the weight of the losses they had suffered. He couldn't shake the image of Lieutenant Foster's final transmission. The calm in her voice as she had known her mission would be a one-way trip. The crew of the Vengeance had made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives to deploy the virus that had disrupted the Devourer's collective mind. Humanity had won a great battle, but it came at a price they could never repay. "Captain, the Council is asking for you," Lieutenant Cooper's voice pulled Morrison from his thoughts. "They're waiting on the line." "Put them through," Morrison replied, his voice hoarse. He wasn't sure he was ready for another conversation about the victory, about the galaxy's supposed gratitude, but there was no escaping it now. The screen flickered to life. High Counselor Morton's crystalline form appeared on the display. His usually vibrant blue hue was dimmed, a sign of the heavy toll the Devourers had taken on the once great council. He looked even older now, the weariness of the war etched into every facet of his being. "Captain Morrison," Morton's voice was solemn, "we are deeply grateful for what you and your people have done. You have saved us from the brink of annihilation." Morrison's gaze hardened. "We didn't do this for gratitude, Counselor. We did this because you gave us no choice. The galaxy was on the edge of extinction." "Of course," Morton agreed. "But the sacrifice of your people, the bravery of your soldiers, it cannot be overstated. It is a debt we will never be able to repay." The words stung, but Morrison remained silent, his eyes cold. He wasn't looking for thanks. He wasn't even looking for honor. The cost of their victory weighed too heavily on him to feel any sense of satisfaction. "Your people, Captain," Morton continued, "have proven something we never understood before. We've always fought with precision, with rules, with the desire to minimize destruction. But you've fought with the understanding that war is not just a battle, it is survival. You've taught us something about fighting against impossible odds, and now we must decide what comes next." "What do you mean?" Morrison's voice was sharp, his mind still clouded with the aftermath of the battle. "Now that the Devourers have been defeated," Morton said, his voice growing heavier, "we must consider the long-term consequences of this war. Your people fought with an intensity we have never seen. It's not a method we would ever condone, and yet it was necessary." "We didn't have a choice," Morrison said, his voice rising. "Your council was too busy talking and negotiating to actually do anything. We didn't hesitate because we knew that if we didn't fight like we did, we would all die." The words lingered in the silence of the bridge. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the ship systems and the distant sound of battle debris burning up in the atmosphere of dead planets. Morrison felt the weight of the truth he had just spoken. The peaceful species of the galaxy had been too complacent for too long, too caught up in their ideals of diplomacy and balance to see the threat that was right in front of them. Morton paused before speaking again. "We understand, but now we must find a balance. The galaxy will need rebuilding, Captain, and there are those who are already questioning the methods your people used. Some of them fear the influence Earth will have in the future. Your methods, your way of fighting, are unconventional." "Then let them fear," Morrison replied. "We fight to win, we fight to survive." The Council was still reeling from the war. Some species were grateful, others resentful. The peacekeepers, those who had once prided themselves on their peaceful existence, found themselves caught between the need for survival and the desire to rebuild the galaxy to its former glory. They had been forced to witness a side of themselves they never wanted to see, one where survival came at the cost of innocence. As for humanity, they had learned their own lesson. The victory was theirs, but the war was far from over. A new threat. The UES Retribution had been a symbol of Earth's military might in the battle against the Devourers. Now, with the threat of the enemy shattered, the ship's crew was left with an uncomfortable realization. The galaxy, for all its beauty, was a fragile, unpredictable place. Morrison stood at the observation deck, staring out at the remnants of the battle. The silence was almost unbearable now. They had won, but it felt like they had awakened something. The galaxy was shifting, and he could feel it deep in his bones. "Captain," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Susan Martinez, her face drawn with exhaustion. She had spent the better part of the day in the lab, analyzing the remnants of the Devourer biomaterials, trying to understand their biology. "I've found something you need to see." Morrison turned to face her. "What is it?" "I've been studying the neural patterns we've been collecting from the Devourer bioships," Martinez began, holding up a data pad. "I thought it was just an after-effect of the virus, but this is something else. There's a secondary signal coming from deep within the Devourer territory." Morrison's brow furrowed. "What kind of signal?" "It's not from the Devourers," Martinez said, her voice low. "It's something else, and it's growing." The hairs on the back of Morrison's neck stood up. "Explain." "There's a presence, something that has been dormant in the Devourer systems. It's waking up." Morrison felt the weight of the words settle over him. The galaxy had been saved from the Devourers, but the victory was short-lived. Something far darker was stirring beneath the surface. And Earth's role in the galaxy was far from over. The victory over the Devourers is bittersweet, and a new, mysterious threat begins to emerge. Something has been lying dormant within the Devourer systems, and as it wakes, the fate of the galaxy may yet hang in the balance. The UES Retribution had been a beacon of human resolve, its sleek hull still scarred from the battle, yet holding steady as it glided through the void. Morrison stood in the command center, his hands resting on the cold surface of the bridge's console. The ship's systems hummed in the background, and the flickering lights only emphasized the eerie quiet that had fallen over them after the battle. For the first time, Morrison allowed himself a moment to reflect on the price of victory. Lieutenant Foster's sacrifice echoed in his mind like a distant scream. They had won, but at what cost? Dr. Martinez's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Captain, you need to see this." Morrison turned to face her. She stood near the tactical console, her expression grave, a data pad clutched tightly in her hands. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he took in the data on the screen. It was a complex array of neural scans and biological signatures, all of them pointing to something new, something terrible. "What's happening?" Morrison asked, his voice tight with apprehension. Martinez's eyes met his, and for a brief moment there was a flicker of uncertainty. "We thought we had wiped out the Devourers, but this—" She tapped the screen, zooming in on a growing signal that pulsed with unnatural energy. "There's something still out there, Captain, something that's been waiting for the right moment." Morrison's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "It's not Devourer," Martinez replied, her voice strained. "At least not in the way we thought. This signal, this presence, it's alien, it's ancient, and it's awakening." Morrison stepped closer, trying to make sense of the data. The signal emanated from deep within the galaxy, beyond the edges of the territory the Devourers had previously claimed. It was growing in strength, expanding in a pattern that suggested something more than just a residual effect from the war. It was intentional. "Can you trace the source?" Morrison asked. Martinez nodded, fingers flying across the console as she adjusted the parameters of her scan. "I've isolated the signal. It's coming from a dead zone, a region of space that had been long ignored by the Council. It's on the edge of known space, where even the Devourers feared to venture." "Dead zone," Morrison repeated, his mind already working through the possibilities. "This sounds like another potential disaster waiting to happen." "I'm afraid so," Martinez confirmed, her eyes dark with concern. This presence, whatever it is, it's linked to something older, something the Devourers themselves feared." Morrison's gut tightened. "The Council has to know about this. We can't just wait for it to find us." Martinez glanced at him, her expression full of resolve. "The signal is too strong now. If we don't act fast, whatever is out there will be here soon." "Then we'll go," Morrison said, his voice hard. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to find out what's causing this. If it's a new threat, we're going to stop it before it can get to us." Martinez nodded, her face a mix of fear and determination. "I'll get my team ready. We need all the data we can gather before we make contact." A journey into the unknown. The UES Retribution and the remaining ships of Earth's fleet powered up their engines, preparing to travel into the unknown. Morrison stood at the head of his command deck, the crew working with precision to prepare for the mission ahead. The galaxy had been on the edge of destruction once, and now it was poised at the edge again. But this time, they weren't facing a single enemy. They were about to face something that had been waiting in the dark for eons. The journey was long, and the silence in the ship felt like a suffocating weight. The crew, still recovering from the wounds of the Devourer War, remained somber. Earth had made its mark, but now they were venturing into a galaxy that was growing more unpredictable with each passing day. As they entered the dead zone, the Retribution shook slightly. The air on the bridge was thick with tension, as if the ship itself could sense the unknown presence lying in wait. Morrison glanced at his crew. No one spoke, but their faces said everything. Dr. Martinez and her team of xenobiologists had already begun analyzing the strange energy patterns emanating from the dead zone. Every scan they took seemed to confirm their worst fears. Whatever they were approaching was not only ancient, but also highly advanced. A force that had lain dormant for so long, hidden in the forgotten corners of space. "Captain, we're almost at the coordinates," Lieutenant Wang reported, her voice a steady presence in the chaos of the ship's preparations. "Stay sharp," Morrison replied, his voice tight. "Whatever's out there, we're not just looking for answers, we're looking for a way to survive." The encounter. The dead zone stretched out before them like a vast, empty ocean, a void where the stars seemed to disappear into nothingness. The Retribution and the fleet slowed as they neared the source of the signal. It was faint, barely a whisper in the void, but growing stronger with every passing second. "We're there," Wang said. "Captain, we're picking up something huge." Morrison's heart skipped a beat as the viewscreen flickered, showing the anomaly ahead. It wasn't just a single ship or an enemy fleet. It was something far older, far more complex. A massive, hollow structure, its surface covered in strange runes and alien symbols that flickered and pulsed with an eerie energy. "What is that?" Martinez whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. "It's not Devourer, it's something else entirely." "It's a relic," Morrison muttered, his pulse quickening, "and it's waking up." The structure, if it could even be called that, began to shift. The symbols on its surface glowed brighter, as if responding to their presence. A massive mechanical sound echoed through space as the structure seemed to react to the fleet's arrival. The alien signal intensified, now fully active. "We've triggered something," Martinez said, her voice filled with dread. "We're not alone anymore." Before anyone could react, the structure erupted with energy. The Retribution and its fleet shook as the energy pulse emanated outward, hitting them with the force of a supernova. Shields were overloaded, systems flickered and began to fail, and the ship lurched violently, sending officers sprawling across the deck. "Report," Morrison shouted, his voice rising over the chaos. "We're being pulled in," Wang gasped. "The gravitational field, it's massive, we can't escape its pull." Morrison's eyes snapped to the viewscreen, where the structure loomed larger, and the energy pulse intensified, pulling them toward its heart. "This is no longer a simple scan mission," Morrison said grimly. "We need to move now, or we're all going to be swallowed." The Retribution was caught, her engines screaming against the invisible pull of the structure. Morrison's mind raced. They had come for answers, but now they were faced with a new enemy, one they had no idea how to fight. "Hold on, everyone," Morrison ordered. "This fight just beginning." The Retribution and Earth's fleet have encountered an ancient alien relic that seems to be awakening, and they're caught in its gravitational pull. With no escape and no answers, the crew is forced to confront whatever this new threat is. What ancient power is hidden within this structure? And what role will humanity play in this new galaxy-wide conflict? The UES Retribution was caught, its hull groaning under the immense pressure of the gravitational field. Outside the ship's viewports, the ancient structure loomed like a dark god, its energy fields pulsing rhythmically, drawing the ship closer to its core. The entire crew was shaken, thrown into chaos as systems failed one by one. Sparks crackled from consoles, and the hum of the ship's engines was replaced by the unnerving silence of a craft stranded in the unknown. Morrison gripped the command seat, his knuckles white as the crew scrambled to restore order. "Report!" he barked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions whirling in his chest. Lieutenant Wang's fingers flew across her console, but the panic was evident in her eyes. "Captain, we're being pulled into the core. Our engines are offline. Shields are barely holding. We can't break free." "Can we reverse the field?" Morrison asked, his mind already running through the options. They had to fight their way out, or they would become part of whatever this structure was. Dr. Martinez, standing near the observation window, her face pale, turned toward him. "We can't reverse it. This isn't just gravity. This is intelligent energy. It's reacting to us. The structure is alive, or something very close to it." The full weight of her words sank in like a stone in Morrison's gut. They weren't just up against an alien weapon. They were facing a force that had been dormant for millennia, possibly eons. This wasn't a battle of technology. It was a battle of willpower, of survival. "Captain, look!" shouted Lieutenant Foster, pointing at the viewscreen. Morrison turned. On the surface of the structure, strange symbols were flashing in an intricate pattern, runes, glyphs, and strange, organic forms that seemed to move, as if they were alive. The pulse of the energy field grew louder, almost like a heartbeat, resonating through the ship. Martinez's voice trembled. "It's communicating with us, it's responding to our presence. This is no ordinary artifact. This thing, it's not just a weapon. It's something far older, far more powerful than anything we've encountered." Morrison clenched his fists. "What does it want?" "I don't know," Martinez admitted, her voice shaky. "But whatever it is, we need to get out of here before it fully awakens. We need to understand it before we're consumed by it." A desperate escape. Morrison didn't have time to think about the implications of Martinez's words. The ship was still being pulled closer to the core, its hull now beginning to glow under the strain. The energy field was growing stronger, and the retribution was starting to buckle. "We have no choice," Morrison muttered. "We're going in." He slammed his hand down on the tactical console. "Wang, engage emergency thrusters. We're going to cut our way through this field and break the pull. Foster, get your team ready for boarding action. We may have to go into the structure itself if we're going to figure out what it's doing." Wang's voice was tight with fear. "Sir, even with emergency thrusters, we're not going to make it through this field intact. It's too strong. We'll tear apart." "We don't have a choice," Morrison interrupted, his voice hard. "Do it now." Wang hesitated only a moment before complying. The ship's engine sputtered to life with a roar, pushing against the invisible force that held them in place. The strain was unbearable, and the ship's hull creaked under the pressure. For a moment, it felt like the retribution might break apart, but then, inch by inch, the ship began to move forward. They were fighting against something far older, far more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. But humanity had always survived through ingenuity. The emergency thrusters pushed them closer to the structure, but the pull was too much. The ship groaned again as they were drawn even closer. "We need to shut it down," Martinez said, her face stricken with fear. "Whatever is inside this thing, it's not going to stop until we're fully inside it. It wants us to enter." "Then we enter," Morrison said, resolute. "Whatever it takes, we're going to figure this out." Boarding the unknown. The retribution finally broke free of the pull just long enough for Morrison to order the boarding team into action. He and his most trusted officers, including Wang and Martinez, led the way. They donned their exosuits and prepared to board the structure that had been dormant for millennia. The air was thick with the electric hum of the unknown, the very walls of the structure seeming to vibrate with an energy Morrison couldn't yet comprehend. They entered through a massive, organic door that seemed to open of its own accord, revealing a vast, dark interior, a labyrinth of twisting corridors and glowing runes. The walls pulsed with energy, like a living organism. It was both beautiful and terrifying. "This place," Martinez whispered, her voice trembling as she scanned the surroundings. "It's ancient. It's a weapon, yes, but it's more. This structure is alive in a way we can't understand." Morrison's instincts kicked in. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with here. It could be a weapon or something far worse. Let's move out." The team moved deeper into the structure, the narrow corridors twisting and shifting as if the place itself were trying to prevent their progress. Suddenly, the walls around them seemed to pulse, and the light flickered, casting strange, shifting shadows that danced across the surfaces. As they neared what appeared to be the heart of the structure, a deep voice boomed in their minds, cutting through the air like a knife. "You have entered." The voice was not from any being they had encountered. It was like a chorus of 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, reverberating through their skulls. The sound was overwhelming, filling the empty spaces of their minds with visions of chaos and power. "You are too late." Morrison felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, but the voice continued. "I am the last of the forgotten. I have waited for millennia, and now you will serve." Morrison's heart raced. The voice was not just speaking. It was controlling. His hands shook as he reached for his weapon, but the voice pushed into his mind, blocking his thoughts. "You are too small to understand. Your victory is but the first of many. You are but the beginning of a new war, a war of will." "Captain, we need to shut it down," Martinez shouted, panic rising in her voice. Morrison tried to push the voice out of his head, but it was too powerful. The structure was alive, and it was using them. "Your people will learn the true cost of survival," the voice echoed, its words seeping into every corner of their minds. Suddenly, the walls of the structure began to shift, the corridors narrowing as if the very space around them was alive, reshaping itself. Morrison's crew was trapped. The team has entered the heart of the ancient structure, only to discover that it is not just a weapon. It is a sentient force that has waited millennia for a new war. With the crew now trapped and the structure beginning to reshape itself around them, they face an enemy unlike anything they've ever encountered before. Will they be able to stop this new power, or is humanity's survival doomed to become part of a much larger conflict? Humanity's role in the galaxy has changed forever. They've faced the Devourers and survived, but they are now confronted with an even older, more powerful enemy, a sentient relic, a force of pure will that sees humanity as the next piece in its dark game. The galaxy's future is uncertain, and humanity's place among the stars is now in the hands of the few who survived this new threat.